Welcome to the Best of Godreports podcast. I am your host Rebecca and I'm here with my husband Sam.
Today we have an exciting testimony interview with BMX rider Louie Cortese. Louie started racing motocross when he was 3 years old. He now rides for Stunt Dudes, which is a team of professional athletes that put on live-action sports shows. They go all over the world to spread the gospel by using the tools of BMX.
When Louie was 18 years old, he invited Jesus into his life. He said, "My life changed just like a light switch, immediate. From that time, I recognized something I couldn't explain. And all of a sudden, the Lord just grabbed a hold of me and said, 'This is what you're going to do, and this is how you're going to do it.'"
On this episode of the podcast, Cortese shares his journey on how a BMX rider became a storyteller for Christ. And then later, stay tuned at the end for his wild love story. You're really going to enjoy this interview from 2022.
I grew up since birth in the Catholic Church, and I never really understood it. The big thing for me was I never understood who Jesus was. I never understood what God was or who God was, in a sense. I never understood anything that had to do with afterlife. I think primarily because I was so young. And if I'm being completely honest, I vaguely remember anything from the Catholic Church. Moving forward, from the time I probably was around 7 to the age 11, my family ended up going from the Catholic Church into a Christian church due to the fact that my dad was starting a business in the same complex as this Christian church, non-denominational Christian church that was in the same complex.
Okay.
And so we started going there, and that's when I was first introduced to the stories of the Bible. So initially, I never felt like until I was probably a lot older that I understood what my relationship with Christ or understood my life, like giving my life over to the Lord or dedicating my life to the Lord. I felt like that came, honestly, when I was a lot older, when I was 18 years old, maybe. I had this kind of understanding of who God was from the ages 7 to 11 and on because of these stories and all these things, and I felt like I kind of said the Lord's Prayer because every Sunday that they were saying it, rather than actually like knowing it in my heart that I was truly believing in what I was being taught. So my family, they kind of had everything when I was growing up. I was very blessed, and we had every worldly toy that you could ever think of. When I was 3 years old, my dad put me on a dirt bike, and he ended up having this bright idea that, you know what, we should pursue motocross. So I started racing motocross when I was 3.
Oh.
I was 3 years old, and we ended up living in Coral Springs, Florida. So there was only one track called Pepsi Ardenia, and that was it. So we rode there every weekend and kind of chased this little bit of a dream. Like, we were having fun. My dad rode, my brother rode. And then all of a sudden, we're like, you know what? We should have our own facility. We should take things to the next level, and we should find a property. It was my dad's dream and my parents' dream to have their own big property that we could kind of like build an extra house on and kind of have like a compound and kind of be away from the city. So we sold our house in Coral Springs, and at age 6 or 7, which is right around the time that we were first introduced to the new church, we moved to a hole-in-the-wall town called Groveland, Florida. And in Groveland, Florida, we had this big house with 20 acres, and my dad built me a 5,000 square foot warehouse, whatever it was, with all of our toys, and we had a big supercross track and motocross track, and every worldly possession that you would ever need to have a kid start pursuing a racing career.
This is amazing.
So through this, I was blessed with the opportunity to be homeschooled and spend pretty much every single day with my dad. I still, through this time, I'm going. The timeline that we're in right now is ages 7 to 11. I was with my dad every day. We were going to the track. We were riding at home every day, and I was just doing schoolwork and riding, And when the restaurant was open, I was at the restaurant doing homework and working at ages 7 to 11. dad, so it was working, school, and riding dirt bikes, and that was my entire life.
So your dad was in the restaurant business?
Yep. So my grandparents are first generation Italians to the country, and in Buffalo, New York, they started one restaurant, which later on created 14 restaurants. And when they moved away from Buffalo, New York, they had a couple restaurants in Fort Lauderdale. And my dad, when we moved out of Coral Springs to Groveland, my dad wanted to open up a business because it was a small town, and he figured that we would grow with the city. And he basically wanted to pay tribute to his father and what he did for him. So he ended up calling this restaurant Louie and Gino's, which is my brother's name and my name. And it was Louie and Gino's Avenue Pizza. And so, like I said, every single day, that's where pretty much I was homeschooled. So I was doing schoolwork in there, and I was working and going to the dirt bike track.
Would I recognize the name of the other restaurant chain?
If you're from the Buffalo, New York area, 100%. They were called Avenue Pizza.
Okay.
It's actually I think there's about 2 or 3 of them still left floating around up there that family friends own and such, but Avenue Pizza was what they were called.
Okay.
And because I was homeschooled, I was at the restaurant so much. So 2 of my best friends now to this day, Isaiah and TJ McCoy, their dad was the pastor of the church, Hope International, which his name is Tony McCoy. And he was an NFL player for the Colts. And so since we were basically a couple days down from him, I spent every day with TJ and Isaiah. And we spent a lot of time together, and we just became best friends. And we kind of like grew up together in a way. And because of my friendship there, I ended up starting to attend the church a lot more, and my family started going. And later on, I started to realize that from watching my parents, that church was not this. It was meant. It wasn't meant for us in a way. I saw stress of like what we had to wear. I saw my parents getting angry and arguing before they would go to church. It added more stress than it gave like comfort or learning to me. And I saw that at a young age. When I saw that, which I don't blame my parents. I mean, there were things that were going on that greatly affected us in the future that I had no idea about. But I had a kind of a bad introduction in a way to church, and I kind of almost in a way pushed it away before I even really knew what it was. Everything was going good with my family's life. Like I said, we were very blessed. And in 2008, when the economy crashed, my family, no joke, lost everything.
No.
I talk about it on podcasts a lot, and this is a big part of the story or testimony, many would say. But in 1 year's time, we lost our home, we lost our business. My dad was diagnosed with cancer. We lost my grandfather to leukemia, and I was in the hospital with one of the worst injuries of my entire motocross career.
Oh, no.
I am 24 years of age, and I've broken the same amount of bones as my age due to motocross. So I was in the hospital fighting for my life while my dad was in and out of the hospital due to cancer. And I had no idea that when my family was losing everything, that I had no idea there was this crash, this economic crash. I didn't know there was financial problems. I didn't know any of this. But what I saw was my family backing me. I saw my family giving me everything. I felt a lot of pressure on myself. If I would have rode better, maybe this wouldn't have happened. If I would have won that race, maybe my parents wouldn't be in this position. And at 11 years old, I had my first suicidal thought. And I was, no joke, wanting to commit suicide at a very young age. I had no idea what that even was, but there was this voice that was almost like a tormenting voice that came to me in the middle of the night. It was like it's all your fault. It's just condemning. This is all your fault. You should just end your life now. You should come to me now. Like, you know where a gun is. You should do this. And I remember just crying my eyes out because I heard my mother and my father arguing through something that was going on through this difficult time, and I genuinely was watching my family crumble, and I was like, man, like, it is all my fault.
Oh.
I started to have so I had spiritual attacks at 11 years old. So my life quickly, as an 11-year-old kid, switched from being a kid to an adult. From the time I was 11 to now, I've been so driven to help my family. But it's amazing that through that time of watching my family lose everything, I realized that there was a story to be told through this. Yeah, we lost our house. Yeah, we lost our business. Yeah, we lost cars. Yeah, we lost all their stuff. But my family went from a 3,000 square foot house to an 800 square foot house, and we all got really close together. And I watched my parents' marriage start to get happier through a hard time. So it was interesting because we haven't even touched on the faith part, because it was interesting to watch my family and my mother and my father kind of like spend more time together and value the little things that they got to do together. Like going out to dinner or going to like downtown Disney for dinner, whatever it is. They were excited. They were happy. When they had all the money in the world, they had everything, I saw them argue more than really be happy together.
Isn't that ironic?
There was always something going on. And so so looking at that, I saw like the Lord say, I'm going to take everything away from you, so all that you have is each other. And I hold that so close to me now, because still to this day, my parents are in that same exact little house, and they're still slowly but surely climbing up out of a hole, and they're making decisions, they're failing, and they're succeeding, and they're trying every single day. The biggest issue that I saw through this time was I blamed the church for what they did and did not do. I saw people that were close to us not really lend a hand out, but take advantage of the situation. And it's sad, but you know what? Like, people are imperfect, and you have to show grace where grace is due. And sorry to go on this long tangent about that one question, but like, my faith was immediately jeopardized because of not because of the situation, but because of the people that surrounded the situation.
Oh.
And so when my family lost everything, we still tried to do motocross. We still tried to pursue it. We did everything we could. My dad was bought like a $500 truck with no floorboards in it and gas fumes coming into it. We were still going to the track, making it happen, using quarters for gas, and using quarters to get a McDonald's hamburger. You know, it's like it's so many things that we learned that time. And we called ourselves Christians, but like, we were never riding motocross for the Lord. You know, like, God wasn't the center of that. But in 1 Peter, it says, "Do not be surprised when the fury trial comes upon you to test you, as if those strange things were happening to you. But rejoice in so far that you get to share in Christ's sufferings." And like, for me, hearing that now, I look back on my life, and I look back on the trials and things that we were dealing with, and it's so amazing, and that God is so faithful that He taught us so much through that time. And that only came from spiritual maturity now, because if you get a dirt bike taken away from you and a dream taken away from you, and you were told your entire life that those two things, a dirt bike and motocross, is going to be your life, and you dedicate everything to it from the time you were 3 years old to the time you're basically 18 years old, you dedicate everything, which is, I'm only 24 years old, so my entire life was dedicated to motocross. And when that got ripped away from me, the next best thing was a BMX bike. I was training on my road bike, going down, still had no real idea of faith. I had these spiritual things happening that I couldn't really explain. Like, my injury, I broke every rib on my side, and I ruptured my spleen. My rib went through my spleen, and right before surgery, my mother and one of our friends, Michael J. Fox, which is not the author, but one of our friends from Florida, they prayed over me, and right before surgery, the doctor comes in and says, like, hey, he doesn't need surgery. There's a sewing on his spleen. And so...
There's a what on your spleen? There's a what?
There was a sewing on my spleen. Like, my spleen was sewed back together. There was no bleeding anymore.
How crazy.
So I didn't need my spleen removed, which I was about to go into surgery for.
Unbelievable.
My mom was always the prayer warrior, and that was one thing that I noticed. Like, everyone's faith was, like, non-existent, but my mother's faith was very, very, very real. And that was one thing that I remembered from a very young age even to now. And so I feel like even my own faith and my dad's faith and my brother's faith, I think it strictly came from my mom just praying for us every single day and dedicating so much time and effort to pour into our lives. But the one thing that I realized with BMX was I wanted to escape from the problem. I wanted to run away. I had these spiritual things that have happened to me that I couldn't explain, like healing saints and all these things. And I never really entertained it until I got involved in BMX to be a bad kid and to run away from the problems. And then within 4 years of riding BMX, I was working a job that I didn't like, and I was kind of just finished high school. I was done with it, all these things, and I worked a job that wasn't for me. And I looked at my life, and I was like, man, like, this is what my time's worth. Is this like, this is where I ended up? Like, at a job with a bunch of guys that this is their last job, this is their life, fresh out of prison type of guys, and just labor work. And I was doing everything I could just to support my family. And I had no idea that all these worldly things that I was trying to do, financially, all these things, it was never going to help my family as much as just praying for my family would. And so I'll never forget, it was just like a light switch. My faith changed like a light switch. I was 18 or 19 years old, and I looked at my life. I was in this aisle, and I just broke down. I said, God, if you're even real, I don't know, I don't understand, these spiritual things, whatever. If you're even real, I pray that you just open the door for my life that I know is you, and I'll take that door. And as long as you just protect my family and you have my family's back, I'll dedicate my life to you, and I'll go wherever you call me to go. And I had broke down in tears. And obviously, it sounds cheesy because it's like, oh, you're making like a deal with God, which is, in reality, I'm not doing that. I was just young in faith. I had no idea. And I was just like, God, like, I care about my family so much. I don't want to be selfish. And you give me something that is only going to help me. Just please help my family. And right after that, like the very next day, I ended up like picking up something too fast, and I pulled something in my back, so I had to go to the little clinic or whatever. And as I'm sitting in the clinic, his head down, already like kind of speeded, I get an email from a Monster Energy, and it was a contract to join their athlete program. And I was just like, that's a sign, boom, let's go. I quit my job. Job that day, and I was like, that's a sign. And it sounds funny because it's not that big of a deal, but to me, it was the biggest deal in the world.
Well,
and
that experience you had, did you say it was in a store?
Yeah, it was in like a warehouse, labor work.
Okay.
I was a warehouse picker.
And do you view that moment as the moment you were born again?
I don't think it was the moment that I was born again. I feel like it was the first time I opened the door to my heart to the Lord. Because to me, my saying is that the door to the heart opens from the inside, and God is the one who knocks. And so for me, that was the first time I stepped out into, okay, Lord, like, I'm desperate. I'm at rock bottom. I don't know if you're there, but I need to know that you are. And so when that happened, it triggered something. It was almost like a light switch. It was immediate for me. I remember going on my Instagram, and I put God first on my Instagram because that's what I believed Christians did. I'm like, I want people to know I'm a Christian now because God just revealed himself to me, so I guess I'm a Christian. I never said the Lord's Prayer. I never confessed my sins and said, okay, Lord, like, you are my God, like, you are everything. I never did that. I don't even think I'd ever truly even heard the gospel before. It was just something in me that was like, hey, I need to pray. And I put God first in my bio because that's what Christians do. And it's funny because it usually the people who put a Bible verse or a God first in the bio usually is not the best person you want to hang out with sometimes, sadly, today. And so I was like, as long as that gets the message to other people that I'm a Christian, and it sounds good to me. Shortly after that, maybe a week later or 2 weeks later, I get a DM from a guy by the name of John Andrus, and he runs this ministry team called the Stunt Dudes. And the Stunt Dudes are a team of guys, Vic Murphy, John Andrus, that go all over the world to spread the gospel, to share the good news by using the tools of BMX. And he DM'd me and said, hey, man, I noticed you had God first in your bio. Do you want to come do 2 weeks of shows with us in South Carolina? And that was the first time. I had no idea that would be the first time that I'd get the opportunity to do Christian BMX shows. And by that one message would forever change the course of my life. My faith started in complete desperation. And then I got to learn about my faith and about the God that I believe in from the people that I was around, like John Andrus and Vic Murphy and those guys. They basically took me unknowingly took me under their wing and taught me everything that today I know about the Lord. And I don't tell them, I don't think I've ever said that out loud, in all honesty. And I am so grateful and so blessed that my life changed just like a light switch, like immediate. From that time that I recognized the Lord, I recognized something that I couldn't explain, and all of a sudden the Lord just grabbed a hold of me and said, this is what you're going to do, and this is how you're going to do it.
So
and I had no idea. Go ahead.
If it wasn't the moment in the store, then are you saying it was a short time after that?
It was definitely a short time after that. It was after, I'll never forget, it was after the first round of shows that I did with the Stunt Dudes and with this organization called Life. It was right after. The team had left, and I was about to leave to drive back home to Florida. And I'll never forget sitting in this little cabin, and I had opened up my journal, and I opened it up, and my first words in the journal were, I don't know if this is true, but I just feel the presence of the Lord in this place. And it was the second time that I had felt this almost like a light, like the presence of light, and this like comforting feeling when I was sitting there alone writing in my journal. It was the same feeling that I felt when I had gotten that email, when I had that confirmation for the Lord. And to me, it was just connected. Everything happened so fast. And now I look back on it now, even just having this conversation, I'm just like, man, like the Lord was in the center of my life since I was 3 years old, in all honesty. Like, I know He's the center of my life before that, at birth, obviously, but like, from the age of 3 to now, there has been so many things that have happened that just point to the Lord. And now, as I've matured in my faith, God has revealed to me over time that He was always there. And now, it makes me emotional, because there's been so many times in between that, before faith, that I just completely denied God. I mocked God. In a way, I hated God because of the people that represented Him, you know? And now learning, it's like we're supposed to be good representations of Christ, and the way that we walk, we're supposed to mimic the Lord in a way. And I hold that so close to my heart that I never want anyone to stumble because of my decisions, you know? And so, sorry for going off the road a little bit, but definitely in that moment, when I got that first email, and then when I was sitting there at that table after the first show, I knew that the God that I believe in is the Lord of my life, and He is who I'm going to follow to the end. And from that moment on, from that one show, the rest of the year was ministry. And it was pretty crazy to me that God called me to Him and grabbed a hold of me. And in a way, it was very similar to how Jesus just chose, like, the first disciples. Like, He goes, follow me, I'll make you fishers among men. And that command, like, hey, follow me. Like, that, to me, triggered me now, because that's how I was just drawn to the Lord. Like, I was locked in on the roller coaster, and I was going wherever He called me to go. And it was very shot at the hip, nothing was planned, but one by one, all these shows throughout the year just started to trickle off. And I started to very much learn a lot about my life, a lot about my past, and I just value those two incidents where the Lord first revealed Himself to me very graciously, and just, it's pretty awesome.
That's beautiful. Well, I love the way God orchestrates people and circumstances to draw you in. I mean, you felt Him to a certain extent as a very young person, but everything along the way was gradually wooing your heart in more significant ways. Did your family, were they able to rebuild at all, start a new restaurant or anything?
So after that happening, my father met a guy, and they ended up going in together on a restaurant, and it did very well immediately. And then there were some complications and issues with that man's health, and before he could sign anything over to my dad, he ended up passing away. And the kids of that guy who passed away, which helped my father start the business, were not the nicest people. And my dad had to hit the restart button again. And there was about 2 or 3 times since after that he's had to hit the restart button. And it's been difficult. I will not lie, to see my dad and my family in the position that they're in. But I believe that the Lord still has a plan for their life, and that there's something that God has for them 100%. And it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be a year from now. I don't know that. But I know that they're on track to whatever the Lord has for them, or they're right where they need to be. Because I never saw my dad really dedicate his life to the Lord, or openly do that. It wasn't until 2020 that I got to witness that firsthand.
Oh.
So there was a long time in between from us losing everything to 2020. So yeah, pretty crazy.
Now, is he still connected though with the family, that has all these other restaurants?
So the way that my grandfather worked, my grandfather passed stuff on to people without any time. I actually found a book after my grandfather passed away that I hold close to me. I have it tucked away. And it is a book of all of the cash loans that my grandfather gave to people, and why, and who they were, the payment plan for that, them to bring that back and stuff like that, or to pay that forward, pay it back. And there's all of these little notes for every loan. And it wasn't small loans. It was 50 grand, it was 100 grand, 450 grand, all cash loans that my grandfather gave away.
Wow.
And yeah, it was pretty epic, pretty crazy. And when my grandfather passed away, none of that money got returned. And the stores that are still there to this day have no ties to my last name, my family. And when my family lost everything, there was a lot of people that turned their back on my family. And it was, it's tough. It's really tough. And I talked to my cousin about it. My cousin told me, I'll never forget, he said, you do not understand what your grandfather and your dad did for people. Because, and they're very Italian. They're like, if I got my brothers together, and if your grandfather was still here, whatever, because they would be knocking down doors for that money. It would be like the mafia, and I laugh about it because they get so Italian and Italian mafia style. But they were givers, and they always have been, even still to this day. When I look back at my dad and what he did for me, he did everything for me, man. Like he really gave me the world. And the Lord, my dad, the Lord, blessed me with an amazing earthly father. He's flawed and he has problems just like everyone else. But man, the experiences that I got to have with him being on the road and traveling and doing motocross was something that I can only pray that I get to experience when I get to be a dad one day.
Oh.
And one of the most amazing things that I can really talk about when it comes to my faith, just in general, is God took me on a roller coaster for years after that. I've been riding for the Sun Dudes for about 4 or 5 years now, and I've been riding for another ministry called Real Encounter, and the Lord has kept me on the road full time. In 2020, there was a turning point in my life. Again, I ended up getting into freestyle motocross because it was the perfect cross between BMX and dirt bikes. And like, mesh the two together, freestyle motocross, easy. I can jump a 75-foot jump, no problem. Like, let's do it. I invested into a brand new van. I invested into a dirt bike. And within the first month of me riding freestyle motocross, I was doing shows for Monster Jam. I was blessed with that opportunity. I was making good money. But the Bible is very clear that you can't serve God and money. And I started to get pulled away and enticed by my selfish desire for money, and what it could do for my family if I made more, if I did these shows instead of ministry shows, if I did this, if I did that. And it was kind of messed up because I knew by choosing money it was wrong, but it felt so good immediately that I just started to my faith started to take a hit, and I started to get pulled away. And it wasn't until February 10th of 2020, I made a mistake my eyes closed. I was just practicing, and I made a simple mistake, and I just fell over, basically. Just a little fall over. And then I ended up dislocating my shoulder down into my rib cage. I tore my rotator cuff, my labrum, and my bicep all in one.
Oh, my.
When I hit the ground, I'll never forget this. That presence of light, that comforting feeling, I felt it over me when I was laying on the ground, my head on the ground, my shoulder dislocated, and it was immediate. I felt the Lord tell me, if you fall and you can't get back up, how are you going to do my will? And that stuck with me, because immediately I realized what I had done. I immediately realized that I got the money before God. I immediately realized that I was stepping into a direction that the Lord did not have planned for me, that I was stepping out of his will in a way. And I know by theology we can go back and forth if that's true or not, but to me personally, I was stepping away from the Lord, and I was chasing money rather than God. And I just knew it. And my shoulder was out for over 4 hours. Like, it was such a bad separation. And I ended up long story short, within 24 hours, I'd already seen a doctor, got my shoulder put back in, and was going into the room for an MRI because I had shows the next weekend. I'm like, okay, I got to get all this stuff done. Luckily, because of so many injuries I've had, I'm blessed with really good surgeons and really good doctors that are around me. My doctor ended up not being there, though, so I was like, okay, this is weird. So I ended up going to a new doctor that I didn't know, and he was very arrogant and very rude. And so when he looked at me, he looked at my shoulder, he looked at my MRI, and said, I've been doing this for such and such a long time, and I've never seen a shoulder this bad.
Oh, my.
And I looked at him, I'm like, okay, so I can, put a brace on, and I can go ride this weekend? He goes, you may never ride again. And I'm like, what? He goes, this is big, and we're going to have to look into ways of fixing this. I looked at him, and I'm like, you're wrong. You're not my doctor. You don't know. And I ended up walking out of the doctor's office crying and just upset.
Oh, my.
And I just told my mom, I'm like, screw that guy, very upset, and cursed at him, basically. And I was just so angry. I was just filled with anger and hatred. And I ended up going to another doctor that I felt like, oh, see the Lord, see, Mom, the Lord lined this guy up for me. This is the real doctor that can tell me that I can ride. And I ended up going to the best surgeon in Orlando. Ended up meeting him in passing one time, and man, he looked at me dead in the face, and he said, I can't do your surgery. He goes, the only person I would trust to do the surgery 100% would be Tom Brady's surgeon in California.
Really?
Without a doubt. And so I get on the phone with my insurance company, they're like, yeah, it'll be $50,000. We'll pay half. I'm like, yeah, it's not going to happen. So just left angry again. Ended up going back to that same surgeon, and I had no idea what the Lord was truly doing, and scheduled my surgery, and then it got pushed back again, and then it got pushed back again. And I was already devastated because I was supposed to make more money than I knew what to do with, and I had all these shows. I was fully booked the entire year.
Oh, my.
Shows. And, it got pushed back another week. And I get a phone call saying, hey, due to this virus that's coming up, we're canceling your surgery until further notice. I'm like, what? I fell February 10th. I didn't get surgery till the end of July. Oh, no, end of June. Sorry, end of June.
Wow.
So almost however long time, it was probably the darkest moments of my entire life. I became very depressed. I was in a relationship that I was unfaithful in, and I was just making bad choices left and right. I was not a good representation of Christ at all, and I pulled away from the church. I pulled away from everything, and I just got mad at God because I was like a kid that got his favorite toy taken away. But I didn't realize that moment that I was dealing with, it was just basically reliving the same trauma of when I watched my family lose everything. It was like history repeating itself. And through that time, I ended up getting into skateboarding, and this guy that I met just kind of spoke into my life and told me something. And I was just riding at a skate park that was away from would like no one would notice me at, because everywhere I go in my local area, I bump into someone that I know. And so I was just kind of hiding from everyone. I hid from my parents. I hid from my girlfriend. I hid from just the world. Like I just saw shows going on, and it broke me. And I never wanted to just go to the Lord about it. I didn't, until a pastor approached me that was from the church that I went to when I was a young kid, and already I kind of had a red flag. I'm like, nope, I don't want anything to do with you. I don't want to talk. I don't want to have dinner with you or lunch with you. And my mom was like, why don't you just trust him? Like, go out and have lunch with him. And he gave me an opportunity, and he asked me if I would be willing to come into his church to help start a young adults ministry, because I needed a presence for young adults. And at first I said no. I had wanted nothing to do with it. But then I just felt what I 100% believe is the Lord just say, you're going to do this. Like, this is what you need to do. And I ended up reaching out to that pastor, and we ended up starting this ministry called ROVE, R-O-V-E, and went from 6 kids to 10 to 20, and it ended up growing into an even bigger young adults ministry, which was rad. The Lord blessed it. But I'll never forget that guy that I met at that skate park. I was just skateboarding around where no one would know me, no one would see me, and this big dude just sitting in the skate park, it was just him and I, he was almost like yelling at me, like, hey man, how's it going? And I'm like, oh dude, how's it going, dude? I'm like, whatever. Had to put my headphones in. And he starts saying things, and then he catches my attention with, you're not a skateboarder, are you? You're a bike rider. And I just kind of like looked over at him like, this is weird. All right, well, I guess I'll have a conversation with you. And so I go over to him, and we just start to talking, and I was kind of just quiet, trying to regain this idea of faith because of the ministry and because of people I was around. Like, I started to kind of walk slowly towards the Lord again. And in reality, I don't think I was in a position to be a leader at all or anything, but the Lord was just like, I'll work through you. Like just be present. And the pastor of the church wanted me to speak on Sunday to the main congregation, but they weren't opening, so I would have to do this like live stream. And I was just kind of like, okay, I'll just prepare something, like it's easy, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. Okay, God, if you want me to do that, sure. And in the middle of the conversation with this guy, he asks me, he goes, can I ask you a question? I'm like, yeah, sure. Weird guy that I've never met before. And he goes, what do you know about entertaining angels? And I looked at him, I'm like, oh, well, my mom believes in it, and I believe in it, and yeah, I believe in it. He goes, okay, cool. So, tell me about yourself. Completely goes, just ask me the question and then just moved on. I'm like, never thought about it. I didn't think twice about it. I was like, okay, awkward, kind of weird guy anyway. We start to get into the conversation. We start talking about the Lord. We start talking about just the world, where it is, and he's like, man, there's kids in Texas that I wish like a ministry could wander out to them, and using all these words that kind of like were connected to what the Lord was placing in my life. And he just kind of stops me in my tracks when I was talking, and he goes, you know why I'm here? I'm like, oh. He goes, I sit on the opposite side of this park every morning, and the Lord told me to sit right here and wait for you to have a conversation with you. I'm like, whoa, that's weird. And he goes, the Lord wants to relay a message to you. And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? He goes, whatever it is that you're going to say on Sunday, you're going to say it, and it's going to change someone's life. And he just gave me a big hug and prayed for me. And as I'm leaving, he said, I cannot wait to see what the Lord does through you. I cannot wait to see it. And I'll never forget that moment when I walked away. And I got to my car, and I go to reach for the door handle, and I turn around, and I'm like, why did he ask me that first question? And I turn around, and he's gone. And I never saw him again. Never heard from him. He was not in the park, like, gone. And there's only one way in and one way out. He was not there.
That is so wild.
I get a phone call that very same day from the pastor of the church. He goes, hey, Sunday we're opening up. Like, you're speaking on Sunday in front of the main congregation. Like, we're good to go. I call my mom, she's in tears. Sunday rolls around. My mom's out of town. It was the first time that my dad was in a church with me, my brother, my ex-girlfriend, all these people were together in a church. And it was the first time I think we've been in church together since I was probably 7 or 8, 9 years old, honestly. And I had no idea what I was going to talk about. If I'm being completely honest, I had no idea. I just remember this verse that really like spoke to me, which was in James, where it talks about, I think it's James 4, I want to say, where it talks about, for who are you to say that you can go into such and such a town, trade there for a year and make a profit, for you do not know what tomorrow will bring. For what is your life? Your midst that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we can do this or that. And like that spoke to me in my life because I was just very submissive to the Lord right before that, and that's what grabbed a hold of me again with that verse, and that's what sparked Grove was from that verse. And I go in, I speak a message, and I was blessed the opportunity. Oh man, it's really I was blessed the opportunity to do the altar call, and the first person that stood up was my dad.
Whoa!
And I just broke down. I broke down immediately, and I was just like, how could I have been so selfish? How could I have been like God? Oh my God! Like, there's no way. I fell. I suffered for this moment. Like, thank you. Like I'll suffer again. Like, I don't care. Like, it just broke me. And after that, I ended up getting almost like depressed because I was so just like, the Lord hit me so hard, and Satan just came after me as hard as he could. He did not want me to go back to the Lord. He did not want me to draw near to the Lord. He wanted to pull me down and bring me down so much and condemn me. And I let go of that leash that Satan had on me, and I ended up completely just turning my life around and I ended up getting out of that relationship and was still making bad decisions here and there. Obviously not perfect. 22-year-old kid running around like crazy in the BMX world doing shows, and I was doing shows with the circus as well as the ministry, and kind of like caught in between both worlds anyway, between the Lord and between the world. And that moment, again, it was like a light switch. I said, I'm done. I give up. Lord, I give up everything to you. I can't be in this relationship anymore. I can't do this. I can't do that. Like, if it's not you, if you're not the center of my life, I don't want to do it. When I fell and I hit the ground and I heard, if you can't get back up, how are you going to do my will? I realized that the Lord was not the center of my riding. I was identifying myself as Louie the BMX rider, not a child of God, not an evangelist, God was not the center of my life. He wasn't the center of my riding. I was using BMX as a tool, or ministry as a tool to make money, and I felt like that was a good thing. Like, the Lord was blessing me, whatever, cool. But it was that moment when I watched my dad give his life over to the Lord that I knew very well, again, this is the plan for you. Well, God had revealed that to me from so many other things that were going on in my life and history, and there's other podcasts where I've talked about that before as well. And like, the one thing that I don't think I've ever got the opportunity to say after my dad giving his life over to the Lord was like, I broke down and I said to the Lord in my shower, crying, I need someone to come into my life to be my wife. I need someone that can be my partner. I don't want her to have anything to do with action sports. Like, she could be blonde. That would be awesome. And I just prayed like this specific prayer, just in this breakdown moment. Again, very similar to when I was younger and had that breakdown moment. Like, God like opened the door of my life. And man, surely enough, He would answer that prayer. I went in for surgery right after that. I had no idea that my surgeon was a Christian and all my nurses were Christian. And I go in, right before I go in, I write on this piece of paper in my notebook, that same notebook that my journal. I said, I feel like the Lord's about to do something to glorify Him. And I go in for surgery and pass out. I wake up, and my mom's sitting at the foot of the bed, which is a similar sight that I've been accustomed to. Wake up, and she's just laughing. laughing and crying, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my arm must be gone or something. Like, geez, whatever. I had no idea what was going on, and she goes, can I tell him? And he goes, yeah. She's like, do you want to tell him? He's like, yeah, you know what? Sure. And he goes, so your rotator cuff was at 100% health, your bicep was at 100% health, and I just stitched up your labrum with like 5 anchors. You went from a year recovery, if not more, to maybe 4 to 6 weeks, maybe.
No way.
And it was not even 6 weeks later, I was performing at a show in Michigan, a Christian show in Michigan during COVID, performing.
That is remarkable.
And yet again, man, the Lord was just like, this is what you're going to do, and this is how you're going to do it.
That is beautiful.
That prayer that I prayed about a girl, a wife, to come into my life, I had no idea that I would leave for a show shortly after that prayer, and I would meet my wife at that show. I always say, when people ask me about my faith, that my faith truly started with my wife. Like, it started in BMX and started like that, but my life was truly renewed when I got married.
Oh.
The missing piece in my life, like, I have everything that I could ever want. Obviously, there's worldly things, but, like, I get the opportunity to hang out with people all over the world, tell people about Christ. Sometimes I fail to do that, and I'm human, and sometimes I don't make the best decisions. And you know what? God is my judge, and hopefully one day when I make it to heaven, He'll tell me, like, well done, my good and faithful servant. I hope it's not all for nothing, but you know what? If it is, then I hope that the people that I got to lead to Christ get to make it there and stay strong and multiply disciples. So the one thing that I sat with, I was going to a show that was not a Christian show. It was around the people that always got me in trouble. The crazy guys, the motley crew type dudes. And for some reason, I felt like I had to go there to this show in Chicago. And I really enjoy coffee. It's a big passion of mine. And I remember downloading this app, Bumble, and I've never outwardly spoken about this in a podcast or anything like that, but I feel like I'm supposed to now, because it's just part of my testimony now. I ended up downloading this app called Bumble, which is all the guys use to hook up with girls, and it's kind of a toxic app in general. And I remember, like, putting in my bio, I'm like, I don't want anything from anyone. Come save me and go get a cup of coffee because I had to stay at the RV the whole time at the show, like, or it was going to strip clubs or bars. You know what? I'll sit in the RV. And this girl, she matched with me on there, and I sent her like a 6-paragraph long essay on me not being a mass murderer. I was real, and I just really wanted to have a good conversation and coffee. And I sent her my phone number at the bottom, and I deleted the app after that. Because I didn't want that gateway. I didn't want to get entertained by anything else. I said, okay, if this girl hits me up, it's cool, and that's it. 2 days later, I get a text from this girl named Kenzie. And I'm like, who the heck is Kenzie? I'm like, oh, wait, it's that really cute girl that I saw on there. And she ended up coming and picking me up. And that day that we met, I got to present the gospel to her. The day that we met, she was not a believer. And I had no idea that that Sunday when we met, the following Sunday she would fly to Florida, and the following Sunday after that we would get married.
Unbelievable. That's a whirlwind romance.
Oh, yeah. And, and my life was forever changed, and it's continuing to change. Marriage is not easy. We went into marriage thinking that because we get married, all of the things that we dealt with would not come into the marriage. Like, oh, yeah, that's going to fix our issue. Just get married, which she did. She didn't really have a strong faith. She had no idea. Like, I presented the gospel to her, and I was already trying to please the church and please my parents and please other people and, like, do this, that, and that. Like, I had no idea what we were getting into, but I knew for a fact it was exactly who I needed to be with. It was exactly the right time. And I knew that because I called someone at the church, and And I told him, like, hey, I met this girl, I want to get married. They're like, all right, well, we'll get you premarital counseling for like 3 months. We'll do this, we'll do that. And didn't really understand. And I don't fault him for that. Like, he didn't understand how serious I was, or he was just trying to protect me, whatever. So I was like, nope, that's not going to cut it. I grab her hand, and I remember I remember it's like 2 days before we get married or something like that. I grab her hand, I'm like, Lord, like, if this is you, like, we're kids, Dad, like, we're kids. If this is you, just tell us clearly with our small-minded little brains just that we know that this is you. We know that this is what you need us to do. And we'll do it. We go to my best friend's house, Matt Manzari. We go to his house, and we just start talking. He asks us all these questions, like kind of like premarital counseling in a way. And
Yeah.
I don't know why he had asked me the questions that he was. And like, yeah, let's talk about this, talk about that. And he goes, I don't do this. Quite frankly, I never do this. And I've turned down opportunities to do this. But if you guys want to get married, then, like, I'll marry you in the backyard. Let's go. Let's do it right now. And so we left this house, and we got, no joke, we got to the courthouse with 1 minute to spare. We got our marriage license, and the day after that, or 2 days after that, we got married. None of our family was there, just him and his wife and his boys and my buddy Matthew Clark to take photos.
Wow.
And, man, I am so stoked that I get the opportunity to be married to one of the most smartest and one of the most genuine individuals that I've ever met in my life. Like, comes from a completely different world than me, and her faith right now is, I think, she's smarter and stronger than I think I could ever be.
Amazing.
And I know there's a measure of faith, but, like, she dissects things and she just dives in. Like, she teaches me every day something new about the Lord. It's almost like stressful. I'm like, where are you coming up with this? Like, how do you figure this out? Like, where did this come from? And she's just invested 24/7. And so, to answer your very first question that you asked, after this hour-long conversation, to answer the question, my faith truly started when I got married.
Huh.
Two became one, and it's like, it's all uphill from here, even though it's tough.
Yeah. Well, that is a beautiful story. I love it from start to finish. You've been more than generous with your time and giving me a really full picture of who you are and how the Lord has led you. It's quite a story. So thank you for sharing all that with me.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me to do this. I love doing this. And the one thing that I always tell everyone when they meet me is when I tell them about my faith, I don't say, hey, I'm a Christian or I'm this or I'm an evangelist. No, I just say I'm a storyteller for Christ, because truly that's what I am. My life story is Matt's testimony of Jesus, and I get that opportunity to use what God has done in my life as a tool to share the gospel.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Best of the God Reports podcast. To find more interesting podcasts, continue to listen to earlier episodes, or go to Godreports.com and read all the incredible stories of God working around the world.